Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We will unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. If you find yourself sitting on a comma in your life, remember, you can also talk to me without a microphone. To explore coaching with me and getting off the comma in your own life, book a call with me at offthecomma.com. In the meantime, let's get into this week's conversation. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Off the Comma, and this just continues to grow and grow. And this week, I am really pleased to have another new guest, and this has really kind of been a theme, is someone who has just recently been introduced to me, and we really hit it off, and we've had some great conversation, and started to become what I believe is going to be good friends. So I'm really excited to have Patrick here on the show with us, and also to continue to learn more about Patrick even after the episode today. But I'm certainly going to learn a lot more about you today and in your story. So I'll stop and actually hand it over to you, Patrick Monson. Tell us a little bit about who you are. Start with, how would you like to be known?
Hey, Paul, how you doing? Thank you for having me on your show. I am Patrick. People can just call me Patrick. I like to think myself as like really mindfulness, right? And along with that is like a willpower type of thing. I'll explain that later. But and the other one is very stubborn towards survival, simplicities of enjoyment, and then laughter for me literally is life. And then the last thing would be, possibilities, because like so many possibilities in this world, so many different ways things can happen. You just never know which one it is going to be. And it's almost exciting, but it's almost scary at the same time too. So
I have to acknowledge you sound a lot clearer about that than you were letting on in the beginning. I mean, those words just rolled out. So, is there anything else you'd like to share about yourself in terms of what you do, or any particular hobbies or anything?
yeah, like what I do right now is work in the retail store. So I'm a supervisor. Shout out to Costco. But I mean, yeah, it's where I work. I've been there for a while now, and I like what I do. I like helping other people out and stuff like that. Retail business is rough, but
Yes.
somebody's got to do it, right?
Ah,
But then honestly, in like my downtime, I just literally turn off work, and then I come home, and then I'm just either prepping for the next day, a lot of food prepping, a lot of planning for the next day, looking at my schedule, see what I got to work with, and I'm not doing that kind of stuff. And then it's just like movies, calling out the friends, see what's going on. And then if none of that happens, it's just couching it and TV. And
nice.
I keep it simple, but I like activities, right? So like, because I'm always wanting to learn more, do more, experience more, have more stories to tell. I think for me, I'm like a storyteller, right?
Ah,
And I enjoy telling them. And I get, I think I find myself even get in my head, and I'm just like telling every single little minor detail. I'm just like, man, you didn't need to say that, but I'm just like, but I want to, it's like really exciting for me to like tell stories and stuff. So that's
Well,
kind of
and it occurred to me earlier, like, people would probably underestimate the power of where you work and how much fodder and content you get for stories you tell, because you have to have made some really powerful observations about people in the line of work that you do.
oh, very much so, very much so. Like stories for days. I don't even know where to start, but it's just in the retail business. I think you see the best of people, and you see obviously the worst of people, right? And then
Sure.
you also see some kind people here and there and stuff like that. But you know, they kind of say it, people at Walmart, but people at Costco. But yeah, so there's so much dynamic you can see across the board where you can appreciate the little things, and then the big things stand out, like
Yeah.
especially during COVID, that was night and day, seeing the difference between how people in the retail business got treated, and and almost the fact that they're almost felt like forgotten about because we were in the front lines, right? We had to go to work every single day, and well, 8+ hours a day trying to keep everything on stock, so it was a madhouse. And it was, but there were some people that were, thank you for being here, and thank you for doing everything you do, but you also had the people who were like, where's my toilet paper and where's my bleach? So
I'm hard pressed for many of us to not remember those
I
days,
know, I
right?
know.
Oh my gosh.
Still to this
Yeah.
day, I don't understand why toilet paper was the number one selling product, I think, in the
Mm.
whole United States. I had no idea. I
If
just,
anybody could figure it out and write a book about it, it's probably
yeah,
you, right?
exactly.
Patrick, let's get into your story. I
Yeah,
kind of digressed a little bit with some of the questions. So before we actually start with the 5 questions,
yeah.
I always like to ask our guests, as you think ahead to the conversation and the story that you're about to share, what intention would you have for yourself?
The intention for myself, I would say, really is to put my message out there in a sense for males, because I think a lot of the times when things happen to males, they're quickly shoved underground, right? Like quickly shoved under the rug, because that aspect of maleness is just like, oh, there's nothing bad can happen to you, or if something bad does happen to you, is suck it up and get out there and do it, right? And even though that's not true, right? Because stuff that happens to males, right, and whether you're a kid or older, still does affect you, right? And if you're a sensitive male type of man or whatever, that is going to affect your every single daily life and stuff like that. And I think the way just society is built is like, oh, we want men that are men, but at the same time, they're like, men need to be vulnerable. But then there's just like, there's counteracting arguments for men, which is absolutely absurd, right? It's like,
Hmm.
okay, I want a man that's masculine. Okay, but I want a man that's very vulnerable, right? And then, or I don't want a vulnerable man. I just want him to be the old school, just do what I say and that's it, right?
Hmm.
And, depending on how you're raised or the culture you're around and stuff like that, it's just different. But I think for the male, the person themselves, right? They know it's a problem, right? Because they like want to seek maybe help or whatnot for that, but it's still, I think it's a very stagnant area where men, I think, can get help and not being looked upon weak for doing so.
I'm hearing you say that your intention is to be able to create a space for male perspectives to really be present, and for us to be able to explore kind of all facets of what it is to be a male and challenge some of the stereotypes and assumptions. And
Yeah, it's in a way, yes. I think it's just having them be in tone with their feelings and having those be actually validated, right? And not
mm,
just to gloss over them, right? Because again, we have feelings too, right? We have emotions, we
yeah.
have deep things inside, but we can't just ignore them and just stick that other thing of just like, no, I can't listen to those. I'm a man. I have to do man things, right? And
Mhm.
and I think my message to them is like, you don't have to do that.
Okay.
You don't.
Well, my intention is to be able to create space for you to share your story and to achieve and accomplish your intention. And that, as it is with every guest, is that someone out there will hear your story. They'll recognize a little of themselves in you and in your story and your experience, and that they will feel a little bit more connected, a little less alone, a little bit more inspired, and perhaps even empowered. So that's what my intention is to give you the space to fulfill your intention. Let's jump in. Let's start with the first question. So, Patrick, where have you found yourself sitting on a comma in your life?
Well, actually, I found myself sitting on that comma probably late November/December of last year, literally. And that was just within my own brain of just what am I doing? What's next for myself? And because everybody has those, negative thoughts we think about ourselves and stuff like that. And it can be debilitating where it just prevents you from doing anything, right? And for the longest time, that's where absolutely my comma was. And I had to overcome that to even try to make a safe space for anybody else that's going to either get involved in my life or anything like that. Because I mean, I feel like you can't necessarily be in a solid state with somebody else if you're not in a solid state with your own self, right? And for me, that was a huge part of it. So that comma stuck with me, I think 26 years. And then just finally getting off of it, it's just like, oh my God, like night and day. But to start it off, you know, this is how I ended up getting on this comma, right? And it's a long story, but it started like this. So, I was adopted when I was 4, right? And from Haiti. Um, um, my adopted parents lived up in Minnesota, a little town called Brainerd, a little cold place, right? So I remember being 4, flying on the airplane. Never flew on an airplane before. Had a meltdown because, oh my God, we're flying, right? Ended up in Minnesota. Went from a tropical place to a place that has snow. I've never seen snow in my life. And so that was a dramatic change. And it was, I'm sure it was exciting. I don't fully remember everything of it, but I just remember the important parts of it and whatnot. But it was honestly, it was a good time because I got to do a lot of things as a child that I've never thought I'd even know what they were, honestly, at that time, like being able to rollerblade, windsurfing, snowboarding, all that other stuff, jet skiing, water sports. Minnesota has like all those everyday weathers, so you can do almost everything all around the year. Like Christmas, there was snow, like first time celebrating Christmas, like it was fun. It was great. And so yeah, everything was going well, honestly. Like I was having a good time, made a lot of friends and everything like that. But there was a caveat to everything. I am a result of a person at a young age. I got sexually abused twice by my adopted dad, and which is big unfortunate change, but it happened actually, like I said, twice. I was around, I don't know, whatever age you are in 4th grade, like 9, 10 or something like that, maybe 8. But then again, and so it happened once during camping, and he asked me all sorts of weird questions that no, pretty much I wouldn't think a kid at that age would really necessarily know. And then what he did, right? So I mean, you can kind of use your imagination. Pretty much all went on, right? And then he threw at me, is like, hey, don't tell anybody because this could destroy the family, right? And I was just like, oh yeah, for sure. I don't want to destroy the family, right? Put that guilt on me, of course, right? And so my mom later came down to the camping, and then with all the other kids, and then I didn't think anything of it, really. I just next day just went out and just wanted to have fun with everybody, do everything like we normally did, and just kind of, you know, out of sight type of thing, right? And so later, I don't know, when I was, well, I don't know how many months later, but it happened at the actual house. And this one was even more devastating because everybody was still there. And then everybody was sleeping, right? And he told me like, hey, if you sleep on the couch, I'll come down with a surprise. And I was just all like, oh, surprise, cool. Every kid likes a surprise, right? And I honestly didn't mean to fall asleep because I was super tired. We were watching baseball to this day. I still hate baseball, but and I fell asleep on the couch by accident. And then in the middle of the night, I woke up, and then there he was, but naked, coming towards me again. And then rinse and repeat, the same thing happened again. But this was at home. And I still remember distinctly like looking down the hall and just waiting for my either brother and sister to wake up to use the bathroom or something, or my mom wake up from upstairs and walk down and be like, freak out, right? Nobody did though. Nobody did. So he got away with it again, did what he had to do with me, and then left. And then I just went to bed, and or he told me, actually, make sure you use the bathroom afterwards and then go to bed. And I was just like, okay, whatever. So again, in a sense, it's just like, man, how many times is this going to keep happening, in a sense, right? Because if it happened already once and twice at home and like nobody saw it, I was just like, this is not really good in a sense, right? So I went to school, really
Mm.
didn't think much of it, but then later on, uh, the people that deal with all that kind of stuff showed up at the school, and then I got called out of my class, and then got pulled down to talk to these people, right? And then what happened was my adopted dad, he wrote down what he was going to do in a journal. His brother found it and called the authorities, right? And so they came to school. I explained to them like, oh, this is what they did and or what he did and everything. And then right after that, they pulled me out of school, put me in a little safe home or whatever for kids. And then later my brothers and sisters ended up joining me. And then, we didn't show up for we didn't return home after everything happened and my mom started freaking out. They later found out my mom had obviously nothing to do with it at all. It was all his doing. So
Mhm.
during all this, or I should say prior to this, I was as a kid, like third grade, I was I was I don't want to say this, but I was like a little ladies man. I'm not gonna lie. But I had a little girlfriends. I made like little things for them and everything like that. And it was fun. I remember the kindergarten teacher would be like, Patrick, you can't be holding girls' hand. I was just like, why not? And so, but after all that disappeared, like straight up. I was, when things finally settled, we had to move, right? So we came down here to California and just to kind of get away, have a new start. But the problem was I didn't deal with any of the things that was already happened, right? I didn't process anything. My mom did take us to a little bit of counseling therapists and stuff like that. I think it was more so for her because as a kid, us kids, we're like, didn't really want to talk, right? I mean, because we're young. It's like you don't want to re-explain what happened, right? So we're just kind of there, we're like,
Mhm.
why are we here? You know what I mean? And so it didn't really get much out of that.
Mm.
And then moving and then losing all your friends, right? And then having to remake new friends, I was literally living a double life. I can't make this more clear, like how much of a difference of a double life I was living. Like my friends would see me as like, oh, Patrick's cool. He has everything together. And then outside of that, it was just mind wars, like bombs going off, freaking shots fired all over the direction, like negative thoughts, like constantly. It was just like a whole other thing I had to try to keep myself in check. And but I never let anybody show that. I never saw, let my friends see like, oh, like he's struggling with stuff, right? And this went through like, so I transferred and I went into fifth grade. My fifth grade teacher slash sixth grade teacher, like, was probably the perfect person to put in front of me at that time because she was so like caring. And I don't know if I ever actually told her, but she could tell something was just off slightly, right? And, because I was shy, I was quiet and everything like that, eventually I did kind of warm up, but she could understand that I think something was going on. So she always encouraged me just to, be positive and just keep doing what I was doing and just, you're stronger than you think type of thing. And I think if it wasn't for her
Mhm.
support, I think the transition between fifth grade and sixth grade into middle school would have been even harder, honestly, right? I mean, it was still hard. Don't get me wrong. It was still very hard, but it would have been even that much
Mhm.
harder, I believe.
Yeah.
So,
Patrick, can I step in
yeah,
for just a moment?
yes,
Because
yes, yes, by means.
I just a huge acknowledgement for you because first of all, I mean, I can only speak for myself and I can't even begin to imagine what that situation was like. And then you so courageously sharing this with us, with me right now, right? Um, it allows me to go on a journey within myself,
Mm,
of how would I have reacted in a situation like that, like how much I feel for you and what you are sharing, and feel powerless to do anything to change that circumstance, and also like just be able to sit here and bear witness to what you've been through, and also kind of smile at your ability to be here telling the story today. Like
yeah,
none of those are meant to be any kind of definitive answers. It's just like this series of experiences I'm having, being witness to your story, and how much I appreciate your bravery and sharing that, and just a huge acknowledgement for what you've been through and still being here today to share. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Oh no, I appreciate it. I mean, it's a really tough thing for a kid to go through that, because you're such a young age where you don't understand, right? You don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I could cling on to, it hit me like pretty early. It was almost like manifesting future me into my own mind. I told myself the only words of advice I could give myself was like, hey, um, don't give up. Like, you gotta go through this. You're like, this is one of those positions where people in life tend to give up, right? You know,
Mm.
because I literally told I think I remember this image in my head. I was just like, you see homeless people on the street or something like that, and they're always just like, their story is, I'm sure, a sad one or whatnot, but it's like they almost blame everything in the world because of the situation they got. And I was like, you do not want to be in that position. I was like, you cannot go through the rest of life blaming everything that happened to you because of this. Like, example, like, oh, I didn't get that promotion. Oh, it's because this happened to me, right? Or I didn't get that
Mm.
because, oh, this happened to me and stuff like that. I was like, we're not going to go down that route, right? And I told myself, we're just gonna figure it out somehow, but we're gonna figure it out. And that's the only thing, like, advice I gave myself, right? Like, again, it was like an adult speaking to me, but I was like 8 or 10 years old, right? And then from there on, like, there was a whole change of dynamic of being able to resonate with people, like, because I still had friends, but like I could just sit there and listen and be like, hear the story, whether it's with something going wrong with their family or, friends or something like that. And I was just like, yeah, no, I understand. And I just kind of give them, thoughts or whatever. And they'd just be like, how do you know how to say such good stuff? And I was just like, I know the struggle. Like,
Mm.
I was still struggling, but I understood the position they were in. I could understand the hurt that they were, right? And so for me, the journey didn't end through fifth and sixth grade and didn't even end through, honestly, middle school. It didn't even end during high school. Like, I was still figuring everything out as much as I could because, again, I was like relearning everything. And a lot of that aspect was how to get along with the other sex, like females and stuff like that, because went from holding hands back in elementary or whatever in school, I went to like feared of doing anything to a female, right? Like, I couldn't hold hands, yet alone try to even kiss anybody, right? And or even tell somebody I liked them or either put my arms on you know those old school movies where they're in the theater and they do that whole little put the arms around,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
The
I'd be that
move.
guy, right? If I had like if I got lucky and got a girlfriend at that time, I was sitting there. I remember myself sometimes sitting in the theater and just like yelling at myself, just constantly, just like, just do it, dude, just do it. Tell her like you like her, show a little something, so she's not like does this guy even like me? And like, even then, I probably still didn't do it. And I think I only did it once because I was just so nervous of being like, them turning around and be like, hey, what are you doing? I don't like doing that. Like, why did I tell you to touch me? Like, I didn't tell you to touch me. And I was going to be like, I knew it, right? Because again, it was that fear of what happened to me was I was going to put it on somebody else and they didn't like it, but they were going to speak up versus what I didn't do, right?
Mm.
Because I didn't speak up when anything was that like what happened to me. I just whatever, right?
Sure.
But moving forward and trying to build those relationships with the females, I just could not do it for the love of me because I was just so dead nervous and scared of what if they said something negative that I would just totally
Yeah.
shut down and just
Well, it seems like there's if I may reflect a few things. I mean, there's certainly so much happening here, and I'm no therapist, but I mean, there's trauma upon trauma in here, and
oh yeah,
and things that no child should have to go through, and then much less have to then process and unpack the way you have been. But what I'm hearing you describe is that it's not that your desires change, but it almost seems like, and correct me where I misstate anything, the violation that you experienced and this complete disregard for and abuse of your boundaries and your autonomy and your wholeness as an individual, because that had happened to you, I mean, how could you envision yourself being the perpetrator of said thing to someone else?
Yeah.
Even though you were coming from an entirely different place, the circumstances are in no way, shape, or form the same, but look what it's left you with. Look what it's taken from you amongst all the other things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And that was probably the most frustrating thing as growing up, because I was right in the like puberty area where, you're curious and stuff like that, and people start acting on it, and I just couldn't. And, it devastated me because, like, I wanted to have like girlfriends and, those ones that build off over times, you have your childhood sweethearts from school or high school or whatever, but I couldn't even get close to that. I mean, I had a few girlfriends, right? But I was still very reserved on how I could act, right? And again, a lot of these times I wasn't really seeking help. I think I only literally had one therapist, and that was in middle school. I went with because I finally ended up breaking down at home. And because I just remember I was just playing video games, and then just the thoughts in my head of just him just saying, "Oh, you're not, you're never going to be anything. You're terrible. You're pathetic, blah, blah, blah." Just everything you could think of. I was just hitting myself left and right. Like it was getting pulverized, and I was just like, finally was just like, I can't. And just balls started like, that was literally the only time I remember literally fully crying in front of my mom. Right. And I just let go. Right. And then she put me in therapy. And then, I talked to her for a while, but I don't think there was so much built throughout time with that.
A lot of time had passed, a lot of built up, right?
That, like the sessions we had covered some parts, but not the entirety of everything, right? So yeah, I got a little tiny resolution from that, but not at all. So majority of the work, honestly, I've done myself, right? The best way I can explain this to somebody is like, when you get down deep in the very deep of depression, of like, you just don't want to do anymore. You want to keep, I had thoughts of that too, like suicide, and just, I already made like a plan I remember sitting on the computer, I wrote it down, and I was done. I was like, nope, like I ain't doing this anymore. This is absolutely like the worst life I could possibly imagine for myself. Couldn't, like, girls didn't like me, or they're always saying like, you're too something, something, something. And I was just like, God, why can't nobody just love me, right? And so I was just fed up with it. And I just sit down and wrote it. And then I hid it in like files of files of files. Well, like, nobody's going to find this, right? And then I was just ready to do it, right? And something I still don't know to this day kept my ass in that chair. And instead of going to do what I was going to go do, I just went to bed and left it there. But my point is, people are like, "Oh man, like, how could you not think about family or God or whatever?" I'm just like, honestly, like, when you're in those states, those things are very minor, very meaningless in a sense. It sounds horrible, but that's the truth. It's very almost like meaningless, because you are so deep and so ingrained in your own self that everything else is blocked out, right? As they say, it's like you are in a deep hole, right? And the best way I can explain this for video game fans, or if people know video games, you're a level 1 character. Depression is like a level 99 boss. For you to get out of that, you have to beat the boss, but you're level 1. Is that going to happen? Most likely not. Why? Because you're going to try, the boss is going to probably one-shot you, and you're going to be like, seriously? And you got to try over and over and over and over again. And then you might, luckily, beat the boss by, and then you level up to level 2, but then you got to do it
Mhm.
all over again, right? And so finally, it's like once you start getting higher and higher level, it's just like, oh, okay, I got you now. Like you can't affect me that much more anymore, but it's still a fight, right? And that's literally, it's the only clear way I can explain it of how bad it was for just to dig yourself out of that hole. But there's this immense strength of willpower to do that, right? Strength is just not enough because strength is either physical or, but I always believe that willpower trumps strength because you can be all out of strength if something happens, right? But your mind, the will, can carry you to wherever you need to go. Like if something happens in the jungle, whatever, strength alone can't carry you out. It's a mind of like literally of willpower to be like, I am gonna get out of here, to carry you out of that.
Mhm.
And that's literally all I had left, right? I didn't have much strength. I only had like willpower to tell myself, we gotta get on the other side, and just the struggles of just constantly, just trying to do whatever I could to get out of those situations.
Mhm.
Just because the battery, the battery that goes on in the mind is just, in my mind, anyways, was just so intense. It was just like, everybody has their voice of like, oh, do the right thing. And the voice of, no, you fucking suck. Right. And it's that voice was so much louder than my other voice of do the right thing. Right. Where I just stopped listening to like the good voice. Right. Because it was just underwhelming. Because the good voices, you kind of plays on your own self. But if you're
Mhm.
not powerful, you kind of fold under somebody else that's more in charge. And that's essentially what I did.
Let me step in if I may. So, because there's so much here that you've shared, and wow, I
Yeah.
mean, just such a deep story and a lot of experiences here. You said you got to that place where it was just there wasn't much left, and you were
Mm-hmm.
faced with making this decision, and you were exploring this and ideating, even took steps to write a letter, and yet you said, and something kept me in my chair, in my seat, and then I went to bed. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to explore that a little bit further. And here's why, because this comes
Yeah.
up in a lot of stories that I have, a lot of conversations that I have, a lot of stories that are shared with me on the podcast and with people that I talk to in the rest of my life and as a coach and so forth, is all of this that you've shared with us, right? That is your unique package of life experience with all of those emotions and all of those different levels that come with it and a lot of darkness. And now here you are, and then something kept you. Something
Mm-hmm.
paused you is the word that I'll use. What happened for you at that moment? Like what did, it's really our second question too. What did sitting on this comma ultimately create for you at that moment?
I mean, at that moment, it was just like a comma I couldn't get off of, right? It
Mhm.
was just what I thought was forever just ingrained. Like, this is the rest of life for me, right?
Mhm.
Like, unsuccessful, you know, relationships, having to, like, at the time, just go to school constantly over and just the grind. Like, the grind as a kid, it was just so much. And I think it wouldn't be as much if didn't have everything else I was dealing with, right? And
Mhm.
because that put a whole different layer to it, it was exhausting, because I think most kids understand, like, oh, go to school, do homework, and blah, blah, blah. It was like, go to school, don't think about whatever's in your mind, enjoy your friends when you can, come home, do your homework, try not to think about anything. And then, but it always didn't always work like that, right? It wasn't always as easy peasy. Some days were much easier and some days were much, much harder. And so when writing that, it was just like I told myself, it's like, dude, is this the rest of life right here? And as a young kid, and I was just like, man, because I was like, guess if this is it, like, this is absolutely terrible, right?
Hmm.
And so I just thought, I don't want to do this, right? Um, so I just thought, we don't have to do this. And then just that's why I decided to write the letter, right?
Hmm.
And I would still love, I went back to I couldn't find the computer, but I tried to go find it again to see what exactly I wrote, and especially towards the very ending of it. And I
Hmm.
couldn't find the letter I wrote to my, whoever. Because I would have been really interested to see what is it. And I think it was probably the very last things I wrote that probably resonated, like kind of hit more so at home.
Hmm.
That's probably what kept me in the seat, but I couldn't be sure. Because I think I remember going through my head after I wrote it and kind of reading what I wrote in my head, and I thought about it. And then I think that's probably why I didn't end up doing what I ended up doing and just went to
Hmm.
bed instead. Um, but because it caught me off guard too, because I was just like already 100% in. So yeah, I
Well,
was
and
very,
I was just going to say, it seems like, I mean, I don't know, but it kind of seems like from over here on this side of the screen, that was getting it all out.
yeah.
You even said it kind of surprised me. It sounds like a lot of it came out. And when it came out, there was some degree of relief there, or release, or because then you didn't stop in the middle of the letter. It was at the end of the letter that then suddenly the pause was there. And
Mm,
then the decision to go to bed instead of take some other action.
yeah. And I think, yeah, because honestly, it was probably the first time where I just sat on a computer and just wrote everything that I was feeling, right? Because that was the first time I've
Mm-hmm.
ever just dumped anything, about all that, right? Not to any of my really friends or anything like that, but this was the first time I just wrote everything just blah, on the paper. And then, yeah, in a sense, maybe there was relief there. It's like, at least I got some things out, right? Um,
It
but
is fascinating because, I mean, by no means of comparison with your experience, but this is why, coaches, therapists, influencers, whomever, we talk about the power of journaling, right? And writing. And I used to put it off myself because I don't know what to write about. And it was
yeah,
somebody who said, no, you just like write exactly what you're describing. You just let it come out of your head onto page, no rules, no format, no grammar. And it's a draining, a releasing, whatever words you want to use. It's
yeah,
so powerful. We're talking about people journaling about their frustrations or their angers or their, you know, being frustrated with work or relationships or whatever. And here you are, you've put pen to paper and let it all come out, it
mhm,
sounds like.
yeah,
And look at what happened as a result of that.
yeah. I think because it, I think if I would have kept holding it much longer, then it'd probably be a different result. And I think probably what it was, yeah, just a sense of just dumping all that out, whether or not it fixed anything, but in a sense, kind of did. But just a sense of like I could do that, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's what resulted into just sitting there, and instead of being full of anger, it was more like maybe slightly a sigh of relief, not a relief, but just like, because I remember not sighing at all. I was just kind of like, you know, wondering type of thing, but it was just more at ease, very slightly, and then
Mm-hmm.
able to maybe take the next step the next following day or whatever that entailed of, right? So yeah, it's one of those moments I still remember, very vividly in my mind, aside for everything I wrote, of that one time where it could have been a whole different story, and I mean, obviously, I'm very glad that I didn't do what I did, right?
Mm-hmm.
And got to the point where I am today. But it just shows like, I mean, just the struggle. Like I remember in high school, after I graduated, my counselor was just like, Patrick, what do you want to do after high school? And I was like, no idea. No, because like I was not thinking of like, oh, I'm gonna do this after high school. I want to do this after. I'm like, after high school, I'm just like, I don't even know who I am, honestly. Like I am just still dealing with so much in my head right now. Like I can't think of one like not you want me to pick a specific job you want me to do or whatever after high school. It's just like I don't even know where to begin. Like I am still learning lots about myself, right? And she tried. She I give her lots of credit. I saw her a few times through my work and I was just like, hey, you remember me? She's like, yeah, and then everything like that. And I was like, by the way, I do give you mad props for trying to, get me to do something after high school and everything like that. Cause she really
Mhm.
tried. But yeah, I was so messed up in my head that I couldn't even try to focus on all I knew. I was just like, okay, I graduated. And my mom's all like, well, get a job or come move to Oregon with us. And I was like, nope, not living out in the middle of nowhere again. So I got myself a job and just gung-hoed and focused on that. Like, or just do the best I could do because I didn't know what I wanted to do and just
Mhm.
do it to best of my capabilities. Just like follow the rules, do well, and see what happens, right? And that's all I had.
And I'm hearing you describe this is kind of an interesting way that I'm seeing this, but I'm hearing you describe, this life of knowing and
Mhm.
knowing a lot of things you didn't want to know about life, about yourself, about your experiences, to this sort of pivotal moment of all this knowing, kind of emptying it. And then from that point forward, it seems like, and I'm grossly oversimplifying, but it
Mhm.
seems like since that point, then you've started to embrace the not knowing.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Because, like, I knew everybody, all my other friends had plans and everything like that. They kept asking me, like, what's your plan? I'm like, I have no idea. Like, because of everything that happened, there was just no picture for me anymore. Like, I could not see myself. Like, I was actually surprised, later in life. I was just like, wow. Like, I did not see myself in this position when I finished school, right?
Mhm.
I had no idea what my life was going to look like. People can picture the future. I was like, I couldn't. I really couldn't. I was just like, I'm just rolling with it day by day and see what happens, right?
Mm.
And that was the aspect of just what comes after. Oh my gosh, sorry. After high school and um and just really being like, this is life. I'm gonna go that way, but I'm still dealing with my own self. So it
Mhm.
was a nice break to just kind of go to work, kind of a lot less pressure of like school and blah blah blah, right? So I had a lot of fun with that, but I was still working on myself, right?
Sure.
And and it
Well, it
wasn't,
seems also like there's something there to. I've seen the worst possible scenario, and so now
yeah.
anything else is kind of lighter, is a little bit less.
Hmm.
Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, I mean it's it's a lot less than it was, right? It took me a while, I mean, because after school, I took 7 years of break, right? I worked for 7 years and then I went back to school. At this point, I was like, okay, I don't like what I'm doing necessarily right now. So I was just like, I hated school the first time. So I was like, college always says it's a better route. So I was like actually really excited to go back and really do something I really wanted to do, right? Or learn or anything like that. And so
Hmm.
I went back and I was talked to a counselor. It's just funny because I was just listening to one of your other podcasts about some guy who was going to school for veterinary school, and they told him, "Oh, don't do this, whatever." Right? And so I was just like, "Man, that's kind of the same thing I did, right?" And so, anyways, I went back to school, and I was just like, "What can I do that I can do for 2 years, not take any student loans out, and hopefully make a good career out of it?" Right? And they told me air traffic control, right? And I was like, oh, is that those guys everybody thinks like, oh, they're like, oh no, they control planes. And I was like, oh, sweet. And I was just like, and I was really, because I was like, I know nothing about airplanes. They're like, don't worry about that. So you do that. So I was like, sweet. Right. And so like went that course, had to get all my GEs done and everything like that. I was stoked. I was like stoked. I remember the first time going back to school, everybody that was in school that was at my work, they're like, oh, like, yeah, make sure you take like baby steps, like take a course and like go in it easy. And I was just like, a course? I was just like, man, how much you? So I went in and I took a full course unit, right? Like all 12 units or whatever it is, and working full time still on top of that. Because I worked at 3 a.m., worked till like 11:30. And then after that, I would just go to class and then repeat. And so even doing that, I was just like, oh my dude, this is so fun. I was actually having so much fun. Like I took courses on like love and intimacy, communication, human sexuality, and just I got all that information as I could to help myself because I told myself I want to be in the best relationship in the future, and I want all the tools at my disposal that can help me get to that point, right? And so when I took these classes, I was so ingrained in them, like just listening to every single thing and hearing everything and just having other people in the class that were actually like either couples or married and stuff and getting their version of it. And I was just like sitting here like, oh my God, tell me more. Right. And I was just so happy to like get this info. I was just like, this is gold, man. Like, why isn't more people taking these things? Right. And I think for me, it was just part of my healing journey to just understanding how to communicate to people. Right. Because I didn't know how to communicate to people. I did, but prior to things happening, I just lost all that capability of it, right? So I had to start afresh. And this, like taking these courses, learning these things, knowing how people think. Like I took a psychology class just because I'm so ingrained of how the mind works. Like what makes you feel that way, right? I was so just fascinated by everything, right? So I took these courses, got a lot of knowledge. The best one to this day, I still remember, is John Gottman's Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Not many people know that, and his thing is defensive criticism, contempt, and stonewalling. Those four things show up in a relationship or marriage, usually are doomed for not working out, right? And I thought those things were, I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is so amazing, right? And so I started learning and practicing or just practicing listening and seeing these things in other people's relationships they would tell me about, or if I got into another relationship or something like that, if these things did show up, because there's ways you can maneuver through them and everything like that. And it was just like, to this day, I still like practice those things as much as I can to not display those things, right? But if somebody else is displaying to me, you can almost curve the conversation to, it's like, oh, why does this make you feel this way? Or why do you feel like this, or blah, 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 and so forth. So it's like I can navigate in a sense, even if they don't know, I know about it, to where it's like a non-toxic, hopefully, relationship, because I have still have a calm demeanor, but it's just like, instead of like matching them, like having the yell argument, and I'm just all like, no, I don't want to do that, But yeah, so it's like after all that, I like went through school, learned stuff. I got my degree. Didn't work out for the job, but which I was devastated by, because it was something really I was like passionate behind, of like at least wanting to have the chance to learn it, to become an air traffic controller. But because there's an age limit, it didn't work out, and the stupid thing came out, the date, there's the limit of 31. And it literally came out on the day of my birthday when I turned 31. So I automatically got disqualified. And I was like, luck, you suck. But yeah, so it was just, after that, I was just like, well, you gotta make a new plan now, right? And I changed my degree to information system security. I still haven't finished it, because I love IT. That's actually originally what I wanted to do when I went to school. Because I went in there, I was like, I want to do something in IT, but the counselor actually changed my mind around to do air traffic control. And so I went back and went to change it to ideally what I wanted to do. And then a few years later, I mean, I went fully into therapist. It was probably because this other lady I was dating, she's just like, I think you need to go to therapy. And I was just like, I don't need therapy anymore. Like, I'm good. And then finally I did. And I was like, I guess I do have a lot more off my chest than I need to work on and stuff. And then again, like wasn't as of November, December of last year, because I'm the type of person, I don't know about anybody else out there, but like that any kind of secret you hold from yourself, you use against yourself. Not all
Mm.
people can do that. Some people can have secrets and lifelong secrets they did or whatever and perfectly be fine with it, right? For me, nah. I think for what happened, I couldn't let any kind of secrets remain, right? Because that negative voice would just use that as fuel and be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, so you still got a secret. I'm gonna dig at you until you
Mm.
finally come clean with it or something, right? And I'm just like, but it's a secret. Not everybody needs to know my secrets, but it doesn't care, you know? And
Yeah.
so just finally unleashed everything else I had in my mind with my therapist. And for the first time, like I said, in 26 years, I remember after that, it was I was taken away. Like my mind has never been so quiet out of all
Mm.
these years of just nothing. And I'd test it. I'd test it. I'd be all like poke myself a little, be like, hey, so what about blah 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 blah, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any rebuttal and be like,
Wow.
nothing. Nothing. I'm like, really? And then I try again. I'm like, what about this one? I'm like, nothing, right? And so it was new to me. It was like for the first time I was like actually able to have my mind back in 26 years. And I'm like, now what do I do?
Yeah. Well, let me jump in with that. You've shared so much with us, and what a rich story this is.
Yeah.
And there's three questions remaining,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you sort of answered some of them. I'm actually going to take some liberties here. I'm going to ask them in a different order than I
Yeah.
normally
Yeah. Yeah.
would,
Go for it, man.
and I'm gonna ask them and allow you to add to it what you haven't already added. So, on this last piece, and we'll be briefer with these three questions. So,
Yeah.
you said for the first time in 26 years, my mind is quiet, or it's the quietest it's been.
Yeah.
So the next question is, what changed for you as a result of all of this?
I think what changed after having my mind be quiet was I'm still working on it, honestly, because now it's almost like I get to live my life, right?
Mm.
And I'm like, what does that mean though? Because again, this whole entire time I've been fighting against myself and, thought really what's next or anything like that. But it's so now I'm actually still, this is probably the next combo I'm sitting on right now because I don't know what that entails, right?
Hmm.
Because I've never again had a future of vision of a future of like, oh, this is what I want to do, blah, 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 blah. This is just like in the middle of the road, out of the middle of nowhere. I'm just kind of like, that's where like it left me, right? And I'm like, okay, so where do I go? Right.
Hmm.
And I have no idea. I have no idea. So it's a relief to finally not have those thoughts, but at the same time, it's scary because now it's like you get to make your choices, and those negative results can also bring back the voice or whatever. But I'm the cause of it, not somebody else, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Well, it's kind of the classic dilemma too, right? To generalize, it's like when you're trapped in a box and the one thing you want is to be out of the box.
mhm,
You finally get out of the
got the box,
box,
yeah.
but you don't know what sunlight looks like, so that can be scary.
Yeah, because when you're in the box for so long, though, that's the part of it. If you're in the box for like a short amount of time and you get out, you're like, cool. But I've been in there for so long, and even though my
Mhm.
mind thinks outside the box, but when I finally get out, it's just kind of like, oh, we're free. We didn't think that was going to happen. So what do we do now? I'm just like, I don't know. Don't look at me. you know.
Yeah. But
So
what really stood out to me though is that I get to live my life.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
However it comes, whatever it brings,
yeah.
that seems like one of the biggest shifts is you being in the driver's seat, being in
Mhm.
charge or control or whichever word you want to use.
Yeah. No, it is true. And even to this day, like I'm still like very surprised that I've made it this far. Because
Mm.
again, there was no point in my time in life where I saw myself in this situation or this place I'm in right now at all. So to me, I'm always just like, man, you're here. And this was also interesting because I get a lot of times where people be like, Patrick, you're 36 or whatever. Like, like you should be well better off and like very established and blah 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 blah, right? And I'm just all like, I understand what they're saying, right? And sometimes that pressure falls on me to be like, oh, should I really? But they don't understand the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is like my better place, right? Like because again, I didn't see myself there. So for me to be here, like this is like the almost dream, of like being where I am compared to where I didn't even know what the heck was going to be going on, whether or not if I was even going to make it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just to being accomplished to this, this is like somebody else is like, oh, I have the great job, I got the good place to stay or whatever. I got drive a nice, to me, I'm like, yeah, this is it for me. But this feels like it, but not that picturesque of what everybody else should assume, like, oh, you should be more successful. You should, you know, have all these businesses and blah, blah, blah. And, go out there and do it. I'm just like, you don't understand how hard it was just to get here for me, coming from the shit show I had to,
Mm-hmm.
deal with. Right. So this to me
And
is like a win. Right.
well, I was going to say too, and unable for other people, because we as people are terrible about projecting our own dreams and desires onto each other, right?
Yeah.
We think somebody should be running when they're celebrating just learning to walk
Mm.
or whatever the case may be. But what I'm hearing you say is also, it's not just how people can't recognize the importance of where you are on your journey, but
Mm.
how much, I mean, it's possible that you could feel better about where you are than they even feel about where they are,
Yeah.
even though they feel like or they think they're in a superior position
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
more evolved or further along, right?
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
really just, it's not just that we don't know what people have been through, but we have no idea what people feel about what they've been through, to what degree of sadness or happiness these things bring them, right?
Yeah.
It's not for us to decide. It's for us to ask. It's for us to listen,
Mhm.
if that's even appropriate. But yeah,
Yeah.
you said, and here I am, and I'm sitting there, inside me, I'm applauding because, I can only self-reference and say, would I be there?
Yeah.
And so you are a role model for no other reason than just getting to where you are and being happy where you are and being excited about the future that you're going to go on.
Yeah. No, it's very true. It's very true. You like nailed it because I don't care. Like that's the biggest thing about me right now. It's like I don't care what people think about me. I've come to this place where like, man, I've already been down the deeps of deeps of deeps, right? So whatever
Mm-hmm.
anybody says to me, I'm just like, I don't even care. Like a lot of times when, I mean, if I get in a relationship and they break up with me or whatever, or I break up with them, they feel need to jab and dig and say things that I've told them and use it against me. And I'm just like, really? And I'm not gonna match that, right? I'm just gonna be like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I wish you the best. Like I'm just always keep it positive. Like, wish you the best of luck. Hope things work out for you. Good luck, right? Because I'm not gonna
Yeah.
match that. Like that's low of people to do that. I mean, I don't understand it, but like I am just the person I am. Like I don't let people's words and sense of me change the journey and person I am, right? So when I
Yeah.
meet somebody, like I go on a date, I'm like, I want to be like, blah, right? I just want to spill my entire story and the person I am and just really connect with that person because that's who I am, right? Like I'll tell
Mm-hmm.
anybody now, this my story and stuff like that because that's the best way they can understand me. I can't omit a lot of things because then they don't understand what that means, right?
And
So,
you worked hard to arrive at this
oh, it's
place
very
because
hard,
look,
very
you've
hard.
already shared with us. Look how
Yeah.
many years you couldn't share that story,
Exists
right?
exactly. So
Yeah.
now it's like if I feel like I have to contain myself and my excitement to be who I am, like if I'm talking to somebody like, oh yeah, this is my journey, blah blah blah, blah, and all of a sudden I get back a little, or yeah, that's blah blah blah, this is mine, and that's it. I'm just like, okay, cool,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I
Yeah.
resonate with people that are like just as raw, or just they don't let whatever they don't let the response dictate what they can or cannot say. So if they were expecting like, oh, their response is going to be hopefully positive or maybe it'd be negative. for me, I'm like, I don't care. I mean, I want positive, but if I don't get positive, if it's negative, I don't let that affect me. I'm just all like, oh, okay, cool, right? Because
Mhm.
again, you don't need somebody doesn't need to remind me of like, oh, you're not what you are or whatever, right? And I'm just like, no, I am. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Mhm.
So it's just, yeah, it's like, how can you, you know, hide um this discovery that you made of being you, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it's so cool when I listen to your podcast of just all these other people of doing this. And I think for men, especially discovering their own self and being super happy and content with that, you mean, and being vulnerable and just being raw and still being able to do, man thing, guy things, right? That's, I think the biggest takeaway from all this, because it's like we shouldn't have to dumb down ourselves for who we are and the journey that we took, to be somebody to tell us it's like, oh, you're too much. Oh, that's too much
Mhm.
information for me right now. Like, ooh, you know what I mean? It's like, well,
Yeah.
that's so it's just I would say because I take pride in like, you know, being able to do that. And I would like to think that other men out there would take pride to being like, you know, vulnerable with either their guy friends or other people and stuff like that, versus feeling like they have to be censored because, oh, that's too much information or whatever. It's just like, well, you're just not comfortable with it, so that's not a thing for me. That's a thing for you,
Mhm.
right? Because
Mhm.
if you're, I mean, people are people, but I understand like don't put your uncomfortability on me, right? Because
Mhm.
I'm comfortable who the person I'm in. I'm comfortable in the skin I'm in and just all that other stuff. So it's just and this is like the best way I have now going for me because of this whole entire journey. Because I'm finally now like, holy crap, this feels good. You know what I mean?
Patrick, I'd like to ask the fourth question. And I feel
Yeah.
like you've really already kind of answered a lot of it. You've shared so many things that you have learned about yourself, but let me ask it and you can add to it in a handful of words. What have you learned about yourself as a result of sitting on this comma?
Oh, man, I've learned about myself that I am a stubborn uh being, but in a good, positive way, right? And, you know, I care a lot about how not people perceive me, but I care about a lot of other people, whether or not they're, having a rough time, whether or not whatever it may be, because I know everybody out there is having a struggle of whatever that may terms of that looks like, right? And just to either give them a little bit of advice that, oh, hopefully perk their day up, or just something that will resonate with them, or
Mhm.
just being kind in general,
Mhm.
right? Just be kind, right? Yeah, there's no point to being mean. Like at work, I get people that yell at me all the time,
Mhm.
right? Do I match it? No. I'm like, either you're having an off day or I'm just gonna let you get, say whatever's on your mind. And a lot of times they'll get it off and then they'll be like, come back and be like, hey, I'm sorry yell at you, blah,
Back to
blah.
this
And then,
power of release, right?
yeah,
Maybe not the best
yeah,
example, but
yeah.
release is
But
release, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's just like, but people I think need to feel if they're not being kind, if somebody's not being kind to them, well, they're like, I'm not going to be kind to your somebody else, right?
Mhm.
Somebody's being mean to me. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be mean to them too. Like, I don't necessarily worry like that. It's like if somebody's being mean to me, I'm not going to turn around and being mean to them. I'm going to be like, I'm still going to be kind to them, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't know where that's going to lead,
Yeah.
right? Or change for them. So for me, yeah, I've definitely realized, you know, I do what I can to hopefully change somebody else's day, or do what I can to hopefully, like especially for my employees to understand, like, hey, I'm here to like help whatever I can, like for mental or physically, like mentalness and the most part of like to get you to your journey or make it slightly easier, and just know that I'm not here just for the sake of work, right?
Mhm.
I'm more behind it for the sake of like, hope you can get to the journey that you want to take, right?
Right.
And know that, it might be hard, but don't give into it because eventually they're going to get there, right? If they want to do the work.
Last question, and maybe you can answer this in a sentence. What does getting off the comma look like for you?
I would say a lot more joy. um, like a lot more joy in the sense of like having family, my own family, to really resonate with that and like having, kids and stuff. Because to me, again, I would love to have kids, raise them up, and give them that adventure of life that I never really got, right? And for me personally,
Hmm.
really enjoying that, right? Because I know I heard the stories like, oh, babies, newborn, they're gonna be crying every second. I'm like, I don't care. I'm gonna go do it, right? Because that is excitement for me that I think I should have gotten, and I didn't. And I want to give that like love back, that cariness back in my own kids. No matter what everybody tells me of either not to have kids or to have kids or whatever, and it's going to struggle. I'm like, I welcome the struggle and I'm going to enjoy the struggle with all my hearts because that's nothing compared to the hellhole I had to get here. You know what I mean?
People who say it's going to be too hard have no idea the lens through which you're looking at it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm all like, yes, you know what I mean? Like, just because again, I have no idea who I look like. I don't remember my adopted parents. I have no pictures of them or anything like that. I have no idea where my facial features come from. But to see that, my facial features on a little kid or girl, I'm just kind of like, what? That's like
Hmm.
so just like powerful to me. And then I just to have my humor, my eyes or whatever, that's just oh, it's something else for me, right? It really is. And it's something that I really hope I get a chance, to do. And that's what honestly like looking off the comma looks like for me. You know what I mean?
I'm hearing you say finally being able to see myself and see myself in an entirely different place than I was looking before.
Hmm. Yeah. And I've always just kind of clung to that, honestly, through the struggles of everything. Of just like, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. We're gonna have our own thing. We're not gonna mess it up as much as we did, right?
Hmm.
Or mine got messed up, right? So,
Yeah.
and then just following that is just really the person that I'm with, just to show that real love that they have for me versus, you know, not so much that I got, right?
Hmm.
And just somebody to be really about me and not try to get more and stuff out of me than, because I'm so nice or whatever it is, it's just like somebody that just really, really likes me and I like them back. And so that's the two things that I really hope for and, hang on to for moving forward. What I want to get everybody to understand is if you're a male, whether you're a kid, that got sexually abused or anything like that, that you can come out from it. It does take work though. It takes lots of work. It's going to be a struggle, but there is a side to it where you can come out of it. And that's what I want the story to be, to let those males know that it's okay. You can do it. Use that willpower and strength to get you through it, but you can come out on the other side. Just don't give up on yourself.
I am certainly moved by this story. I mean, I've been sitting here taking notes furiously and just there's just so much that I can look at in your story and appreciate and admire and just be in awe of. So thank you for everything that you've shared with us.
Of
And
course.
all that it had to have taken to do so. So I just want to acknowledge you for that. And Patrick, where would people find you? We're going to put it in the show notes, but tell folks how they can find you if they wanted to reach out to you or interact with you.
Yeah, so I do have Facebook. People can find me up on there. Same thing with Instagram. I do have a platform on Twitch. I don't use that much, but I am on there. People can find me. But other than that,
All
Yeah.
right. Well, like I said, we'll have the links in the show notes. And the other thing that we do on this podcast for two reasons. One, because this is all about sharing people's stories and allowing us to see each other, be mirrors to each other, for each other. We also do this thing I call acknowledgments, which is, it's part of your story, people who matter in your life, organizations, causes that are important to you. So, who might you acknowledge in your circle that you would like to give a voice to, lift up, or, give a little bit of publicity that maybe they hadn't had before?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I would actually like to thank my teacher, my fifth grade like slash sixth grade teacher. Her name is Danette Kruger over at Korematsu Elementary School here in Davis. She's, like I told you in the story, like was the one that, if it wasn't probably for her, that I've been definitely a different track. And then definitely my current therapist, definitely helped me a lot for making a comfortable spot for me to be able to kind of unleash. And then all the books that I read in high school, which kind of paved the path for me, I think. So a lot of them were the John Gottman's Seven Principles for Making Love and Marriage Work, Sam Keen, To Be Loved and Be Loved, and then Gary Chapman, Things I Wish I Knew Before We Got Married. So those are all great books. I feel like everybody should read them because I feel like you get something taken out of it where it might help you in your current marriage or relationship, or just knowledge to have, right? And I think it's a good thing for people to just look into, because you can never not have enough tools in your box, right? Especially in relationships, because we think we need all of them that we can get.
And that kind of brings us full circle, right? Because one could say, and I humbly offer it up merely as an observation, but one could say that perhaps some of these things were missing in the person that started this story that you shared with us at the beginning. Perhaps if that person had been more full in their sense of relationships, then your story wouldn't have begun the way that it did.
So. Exactly.
Patrick, thank you so much. And yes, I just thank you so much for sharing all of this honesty and this vulnerability, because I do believe that there's probably a lot of people out there who wouldn't have told this story, and there's a lot of people who probably never heard stories like this, that I think this is just going to do a lot of good for. So thank you. And I look forward to talking to you more off the microphone as well. And so very much looking forward to more conversation, and you have a great week.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
What an honor and a privilege it is for me to witness these powerful stories. I hope you feel the same way too. I invite you to think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. It can be magical to set aside your expectations and just let the thoughts flow out of your head and onto paper, and surprises can reveal themselves to you. And if you do discover something you'd like to unpack further, book a call with me and let's talk about it. My links are in the show notes. Meanwhile, be sure to like this episode and follow the podcast here on this platform. Also, follow me on social media at Off the Comma. Interact with the posts, share what you learned from each episode, or just share your thoughts about the topic in general. And check out my website for workshops, events, and updates. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. As always, keep noticing and keep listening.